Let's consider two examples, one of a bar graph and one of a line graph, that really show how the display of data can affect our perception of the data. Our first example is this bar graph, which shows differences in mathematics test results between boys and girls in a number of different countries. Now, this graph is intending to highlight these very small differences in the scores, but it's not necessarily giving us a very accurate picture of how these scores relate back to, or how they compare if we were to look at them as totals on a scale from 0 to maximum score, rather than zooming in on a very small portion of the data. Alright, so for example, if you'll notice, this vertical axis runs on a scale from 460 to 580, rather than from 0 to 580. So we're really missing kind of the rest of the scale here all the way down to 0. So when you're picturing these bars, if you really wanted to see how the boys and girls scores compare kind of in size, then you'd almost need to picture these bars as kind of running all the way back down to 0, and then that maybe gives you a better overall picture of how they compare. So numerically we can still see what this looks like, and let's calculate a relative change or a difference between the boys' scores and the girls' scores. All right, and then let's also look at the relative difference in the heights of the bars and just see what the difference is there. All right, so for the overall score comparison, all right, let's compare the boys' scores to the girls' scores. All right, so we can do that by subtracting. Okay, boys' scores minus the girls' score. And then we're comparing to the girls' score, so let's divide by the girls' score. And this is a difference of 5 points, okay, out of 479. And that's about a 1% difference. Okay, so we could say that the boys, on average, because these are mean scores, on the average the boys scored about 1% higher than the girls did. All right, what about the heights of the bars? Okay, so let me write the 1% up there. If you compare the heights of the bars, all right, well, how high is the bar for the boys' scores? Well, it's running from 460 to 484, so that's 24. And then the height of the girls is from 460 to 479, so that's a height of 19. All right, and then if you subtract those and compare to the height of the girls' bar, that's going to give the relative difference, okay, which is still a difference of absolute difference of 5, but now we're looking at that out of 19, and that's actually about 26%. Okay, so what we know is that while the boys scored about 1% higher than the girls did, it looks like the blue bar is actually about 26% taller than the red bar. So it's actually making it look like there's a greater difference in scores than there actually is if we were to consider, these bars all the way back down to 0. And this is an example of a line chart. This one is showing a percentage change. Right? So what could be misleading about this is that the graph on the left is showing changes in college tuition as percentage changes. All right, so when the graph drops, it would be tempting to think that college tuition is dropping as well. All right, but these are percent changes, and all of these percents are positive. All right, so for instance, in 2003 to 2004, okay, for public four-year colleges, there was it looks like about a 13% change from the previous year, meaning college tuition increased by 13%. The next year, there's a percent change of about 10 or 11%, right? But that's still a positive percentage change. So that means that tuition increased 10 or 11%. It didn't drop 10 or 11%, right? So if we actually wanted to show a decrease in the amount of the college tuition, we'd actually need a negative scale here. We'd need to see some negative percentages, and then these dots, these points would need to be actually below 0 on the axis. All right, so what we're really seeing when the graph drops here isn't that college tuition is decreasing, it's just that it's growing at a slightly lower rate than it grew the year before. Okay, so smaller changes, but still in the positive direction. So just be aware that this type of graph is showing the size of the change rather than what's happening with the actual money or the data or whatever it is that we're talking about changes in.